Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. If you're wondering if you're in the right place, this is the during school hours session. So I wanted to thank Guthrie and Maggie and the entire Interfaith team for convening this conference and with all their partners and for inviting me to speak here. And I especially want to thank our three panelists, and I will introduce you in a minute, so hang tight. My name is Orit Avishai. I am a professor of sociology at Fordham University in New York, where I teach and research about religion, politics, and the law. I am researching contemporary battles about church-state separation and religious freedom. And as all of you know, public education is at the center of all of this. And before I turn into the session, I'm just going to put in a shameless plug for my ongoing research. So if you're doing work in the church-state space, which I suspect you are because you're here, especially at the grassroots level, I'd love to talk to you. Whatever your issue is, I'd love to talk to you, to learn from you. My research is ongoing. Okay. So over the past day, we've heard about several key issues that are coming up and being litigated across states. 10 Commandments, school prayer, DEI, school chaplains, and the misuse of the Bible in curriculum. There's one issue that hardly gets any mention. I think there was one mention in talk today, which is RTRI, or Release Time for Religious Instruction. So RTRI policies allow public school students to be excused from school to attend private, off-campus religious classes during the school day. As we will hear from our panelists, due to the entry onto the scene of a particularly aggressive player, RTRI policies have immediate consequences for public school students, for their families, and for communities, and really for our democracy. We'll hear, I'm sure, about proselytizing, bullying, ostracizing, and we should all be paying attention. Now, it wasn't always this way. The policies surrounding RTRI date back to a pair of mid-20th century Supreme Court decisions, which set the conditions for release time programs. The arrangement seems to have flown mostly under the radar for a very long time, until really a few years ago when this Ohio-based LifeWise Academy decided to test the limits and then stretch the limits of constitutional arrangements as part of the broader conservative Christian effort to infuse public education with, they say religion, but really Christianity, as we've been hearing over the past day. RTRI, as practiced by LifeWise, has become a key vehicle for those wishing to further a vision of the U.S. as a Christian nation. And their tool for doing so is evangelizing to public school children who LifeWise sees as a mission field. So LifeWise wants to combat moral decline, empty pews, what it calls the problem of church-state separation, by pulling kids out of school for a weekly hour of Bible study. LifeWise devised an aggressive plug-and-play model that local chapters can draw on to bring its programs to their communities. They're currently, the numbers are a little fuzzy, so take this with a grain of salt, but around 400 school districts, around 1,000 schools, and they claim to serve tens of thousands of students at this time. So our session takes its name from the book by the same name, authored by Joel Penton, LifeWise founder and CEO. Molly is holding it up. Thank you. I had a copy and I can't find it now. If you buy it, just buy it used. So, you know, products don't go where they shouldn't go. Where he lays out his blueprint, and the book declares on the back cover, I believe, yep, we're teaching the Bible during school hours, and we promise it is legal. If the plan sounds aggressive, defiant, and disruptive, it is so by design. And again, we will hear about this from the field. LifeWise isn't just in the business of teaching the Bible to school-age children. It's in the business of doing battle over seemingly settled law by cynically seeing how far it can stretch the legal envelope. It is in the business of pushing a radically different vision of public education than the one that most of us here hold. And it is very, very big business. Its revenue last year was over $30 million. As Mickey Dolan's just told us in the presentation about school chaplains, we should be following the money. LifeWise began operations during the pandemic when its proof of concept programs drew little attention. And it wasn't until a couple of years later, when its programs began expanding exponentially, that it began attracting attention. By then, it was getting too big to stop. It was attracting donors, lobbying school boards and state houses for favorable legislation. But then citizens did what they do best when they're faced with arrangements that defy what they find fair and right. They began to push back. So when Guthrie asked me to lead a session about my research with grassroots activists, I thought that they should be with us in the room so that we can think together, well, first learn together and then think together about several key strategies. So you'll hear about ideas that have run through the presentations really over the past days, how to push back against religious incursions, how this is a fight for inclusive, pluralistic religious freedom. Maggie, you talked about that. How the fight for democracy is at our front door, a battle we should all be fighting, right? Sky Fairman talked about this and others. I've come to think of RTRI and LifeWise as kind of exhibit A in our study of how Christian nationalism has evolved into deliberate, coordinated political strategy that is intentionally designed to embed particular religious beliefs into policy and law. As you will hear from the panelists, LifeWise operations undermine civic institutions that are supposed to serve, as Randy Weingarten reminded us, as unifying spaces. That is what is at stake. But something else is happening. People are finding each other. And I just learned in the lead up to this that, so Molly and Zach, I'll introduce them, they work together. They had not met Anita yet in person, but they've kind of been coordinating through the infrastructure that they have built for all of us. Okay, so I'm very pleased to introduce our panelists. So Molly Gaines, Wave, and Zach Parrish are the co-founders of the Secular Education Association, SEA. Find them on Facebook, and they also have a webpage. Formerly Parents Against LifeWise. As parents of public school children in Ohio and Indiana, they launched SEA in 2023 to defend secular education and protect kids from religious coercion in schools. Today, the SEA is a national parent-led network with over 10,000 members in more than 30 states. They are the leading voice in exposing LifeWise Academy, and they fight for a separation of church and state in public schools. They didn't include this in the bio that they sent me, but I'll just put a plug. They're probably the national experts on what's going on the ground, because day in, day out, people reach out to them over Facebook and in private messages. They are really the national experts here. Anita White is a native Kentuckian. She has a BS in mathematics education and advanced degrees in educational administration. After teaching high school math for 9 years, she served as an assistant principal in Marion County in Kentucky. Later, she served as assistant superintendent in Elizabethtown Independent School before moving to the Oldham County School District. There, she served as the assistant superintendent of curriculum and instruction and the chief academic officer before retiring. Alas, democracy doesn't let people rest. So after watching the attacks on our democratic norms and institutions, she decided to join Kentucky Citizens for Democracy, a grassroots organization based in Oldham County, and she currently serves as the associate director of the organization. So I've asked, so Molly and Zach will kick us off, and then Anita Davis. I don't know why.
That's fine.
Thank you. They will present, and then we can engage in conversation. So Molly and Zach, thanks for your patience, and take it away.
Sure. Thanks so much for having us. We really appreciate it. Obviously, I'm Molly. This is Zach. We're Secular Education Association, co-founders of that. So really quickly before we get started, I wanted to sort of go back to what Orit had said, and everything she said was absolutely correct about RTRI. But I think what really needs to be understood is that it started as a compromise between religious communities and public schools. And so at this time, clergy and parents were really worried that an increasingly secular nature of schools was sort of eroding their children's religious values or their religious traditions. There was a big concern about that. And so the original intent of RTRI was not about diversity of belief or of equal accommodation. It was about reinforcing the religious majority's hold in areas where they already held power. So please know that these are majority religions: Protestant, Catholic, Judaism, LDS, and these are the traditional denominations or the traditional religions that used RTRI. And so it only ever worked in an area where they were already the power. So we're not talking about any other kind of student or any other kind of religious belief being able to be represented in the same way: Hindu, Sikh, et cetera, any other kind. So it's really important to understand that from my point of view, this was never right to begin with. So we headed down a wrong path when we allowed it to begin with. And so that's why these programs are never universal across the country, and they only flourish where one faith community can mobilize the school board, the parents, and the clergy all together in unison to agree that this one religion is the one that they are going to represent in their district, in their school district. So just keep that in mind about RTRI. A lot of people like to just talk about it as though it's perfectly legal and everything's fine. But as we all know, at the same time, secularism, or I'm sorry, not secularism, but segregation was also legal. So we need to revisit some things as we have evolved, right? So that's important to understand. As far as C goes, Zach and I began this work. Zach's daughter was personally affected by LifeWise Academy. She was shoved into an unattended study hall inside of a gymnasium to watch videos and on an iPad and read by herself, despite struggling with reading at that time. And Zach, when he inquired, why is it that my daughter is suffering while these other children go? And of course, in his school, it just so happened to be that 80% of the class was leaving. So there was only a couple of students that were left behind. And Zach did everything he possibly could. I hate to speak for him. He can jump in anytime he wants to, but Zach did everything that a citizen of our country knows to do to stand up for their First Amendment rights for his daughter. I'm talking he involved his state, him, the ACLU, Freedom from Religion Association, AU, and I'm not disparaging any of these organizations. Please know that. What I'm trying to explain is that he did everything that we know to do, that we're told to do, and got nowhere. And so that's sort of where we come from. We had to organize ourselves. And that's the power, right, of the grassroots organization. So Zach, do you want to jump in and share anything specific about your experience or what started you off?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, keep in mind when she says that my daughter was put into a study hall, this was in second grade, right? One of the arguments is kids need study hall. That's fine when we're talking about high school or middle school. That's not fine for elementary school students. They should not be left uninstructed while other students are going off campus and being instructed. That in and of itself is discrimination in my head. Why is one portion of the student body receiving an instructed class while another portion is not? That in and of itself is discrimination from my perspective, right? Because of her religious beliefs or lack thereof, right? Um, Aside from that, there was ostracization there. She was told she was going to hell, and this is something that she didn't tell me until years later because she didn't want to get me worked up and have me blowing this into more of a big deal than I already was, right? She was too worried to even tell me that she was getting bullied at school because of this until years later. Um, and this is just my story, and I think it's really important to emphasize, I'm telling this story because it is my personal experience, but we have seen this time and time and time and time again as we have grown and as more parents come to us. We see this type of thing over and over and over again. We have hundreds of testimonies of kids being treated like this, kids being told they're going to hell by their friends, kids being told you look like a lesbian, so I can't be your friend because of what this program is teaching. And make no mistake, it is because of what this program is teaching. So yeah, what really set me off more than anything was the fact that the school listed this class, LifeWise, on the schedule right alongside art, gym, and music, right? This was on her weekly schedule. So that's really when I started raising questions. What's my daughter going to be doing? And, like we said, she was just sent to a gym to read by herself. And keep in mind, this was right out of COVID. That's why she was struggling with reading, because up until that point, all of her schooling had been virtual. All of her schooling had been on Zoom because of COVID, right? So, but again, that's just my personal story and how I got started on all of this. And that was back in 2021. Molly reached out to me because I was on Reddit throwing a fit about it. She found me on there. And at that time, there was no opposition to this program. This program was still pretty small, right? So there was nothing negative, no opposition whatsoever to this program. Everything you could find about LifeWise when you Googled it was positive, except for what I was saying on Reddit. And it got a good bit of traction on there, so I was pretty easy to find. But she reached out to me and said, this is going to be a problem, which I knew. I knew this was going to be a problem, and Molly recognized that too. And she reached out to me, and we just kind of joined forces, and we've grown from there. So like she mentioned, this is legal, right? At least on the basis, the premise of this is all legal. This goes back to a case called Zorak versus Clausen from 1952, in which the Supreme Court upheld, and this is really important, the Supreme Court upheld that schools could allow these programs. They didn't say this was a parental right, which is the narrative that is being spun now, right? This program and its supporters and all of these organizations behind it love to just say this is a parental right to have our kids pulled out of school. And you can make that argument. It's your right as a parent to pull your kid out of school for whatever you want. The key here is when they're getting pulled out for this religious instruction, they're still being marked as in attendance. That isn't a right. There's nothing in the Constitution that says you can just pull your kid out of school and still have them counted as an attendance, right? So, there's really these details and these nuances that matter when we're talking about this. But again, what the Supreme Court upheld was that schools could allow these programs. And what we're seeing today is they are trying to push this law and force schools, mandating schools to allow these programs instead of giving them the choice, right? It used to be that schools may allow it if it worked into their schedule, if they wanted to do this. Now they have to. And we're seeing this happen all over. We'll get into that a little bit later. But also, when the Supreme Court gave this ruling, there were a couple guidelines that they put in place and a couple restrictions. One of those main guidelines, like the most important thing, was that these programs happen off school property, right? That was the key, off school property. They had to be privately funded. No tax dollars were supposed to go to the support of these programs. And of course, you had to have parental permission. There could be no coercion from the school. As we know, the definition of coercion has changed. It is certainly a lot more specific now than it used to be, with Kennedy, different court rulings since the 50s. They've really kind of taken the legs out from under what coercion means. The other big thing that often gets overlooked when we're talking about Zorak is that no announcement was supposed to be made in the schools about these programs, right? They shouldn't be promoting these programs through handouts through the school, on the announcements, on the school website. It very specifically says in Zorak, no announcement of any kind is supposed to be made. But this is something we see happening over and over again, right?
So let's talk a little bit about what LifeWise is specifically. LifeWise is not the only one. It's just the biggest and baddest of them all, the most successful by far. They are basically using a franchise system. It's sort of like an MLM and a franchise got together. And they, like Zach just said, it's a plug and play system, so it makes it very easy to replicate. So they're giving you all the tools, everything, every template, every letter to your school district, every marketing campaign and email, all of it is given to you as provided. So they make it very easy for people to just copy and paste and keep it rolling. And so that's sort of where this is a different beast. Not only is it national, which we've never seen before, but it's also based in recruitment. That is also something we've never seen before. Zach used to be a Mormon. He grew up Mormon. He will tell you that the kids he went to school with did not want to go to seminary when he left for school, right? Which is what RTRI is for Mormons. And it wasn't attractive. It wasn't a party. They weren't getting food. They weren't getting treats and t-shirts. They weren't creating an in and out division thing. It was very much a personal, private thing that was supposed to be local and quiet. And that's how it's been for the last 100 or so years.
Right.
Until
let me jump in here. By
Yeah.
design, these programs were for people who already are a member of that faith tradition to expand their education in that faith tradition. I think, I also just want to mention They do seminary as release time in places like Utah, Montana, where there is a large LDS population.
Sure.
Where I grew up in Northwest Ohio, there was not a large LDS population. My church was about 40 minutes away. I got up before school to do it, right? Because that was what the faith required. You make time for what you need to do if you believe, right? And the argument we always hear for LifeWise is that parents are too busy to give their kids this Bible education. Well, then you should make time. You shouldn't have to take it out of your school day. If you believe what you are doing and you want to have that faith and instill it in your child, you prioritize that and you make time to do that without taking it out of the school day, without putting it on other kids.
Yeah, exactly. Without having it affect other children. That is exactly the key as well. And the other thing that we have to understand is they're taking the kids off site, right? So they are technically speaking adhering to the Zorak precedent that it has to be off site.
In most cases.
I was going to say, in most cases, and Zach's going to talk a little later about a real interesting part of a law there in Texas that's concerning, but again, off-site, so they're taking the children to a second location. A lot of times that's a local church. We have also seen where it is somewhere like a community center, a gun club, someone's garage. They had planned at one point to take the children to Color Master Inc., which is a chemical dye factory here in, is it Ohio? I think
It
it's
was in Indiana.
No, I'm sorry. Yes, it's Indiana. And that particular factory, obviously, dangerous chemicals, no place for children. They were going to have it in the conference room, sure. But the most concerning part about that is that this company or this factory at the time employed at least one violent child sexual predator. And so that person would have been on campus working, presumably, when the children were brought in to have this class at LifeWise. And so they were all planned and approved to do this and set to go until Secular Education Association blew the whistle and said, we can't even let you do this. Like, we can't even let you think about doing this. And we sort of blew the lid on that story, and they had to end up changing the location, luckily. But that's sort of, one of the issues, again, is the lack of oversight and the liability and the safety problems. We're talking about a second location. Those people that have access to that second location aren't vetted. Even the people who are being vetted from LifeWise, the teachers and the volunteers, their background checks that are being run are the equivalent of a consumer report. So in some cases, it is less strict than like Home Depot would be conducting for a job. You have to understand the differences between background checks. You can say the word background check, and in your mind, it may seem safe and it may seem comprehensive, and it is nothing. A teacher in many states, most states, has to do like a Bureau of Criminal Investigation background check, FBI fingerprint, like the whole shebang. In Ohio, we also have, in a lot of places, I'm sure Anita can help jump in, but we have a wrap back system, and it's sort of like an alert system that lets everyone know what's going on with like that person that's involved in our school system. So like if you're a teacher and you get charged with neglect of a child, that's going to pop up, and your superintendent, your school district, the state of Ohio, the education department, all of those places are going to know immediately what you've done that makes you a risk, to the rest of the children as a teacher. Like that's the whole point. LifeWise teachers and volunteers are not being put into this system. We actually have documented instances of issues where like they have hired a woman who was fired from a public school in Ohio for sexting with a student, but they hired her to be the director of their program. Their excuse was she didn't disclose that on her background. Well, me personally, broke that story. I'm not a journalist, I'm a parent. But I broke that story, and all I had to do was do a simple Google search of the woman's name. Her name was Renee Beck, and it was lots of articles about her being let go of Loudonville School District in Ohio. So that just goes to show you, the hiring, where they're taking the kids, the bus drivers aren't held to the same standards as our state school bus drivers are. There's a lot of things. Zach, do you want to jump in and talk about anything else?
Yeah, we could talk for days about the lack of qualifications and the safety concerns, and this is just one piece of it. I think it's also important to understand they push this program as non-denominational, but you have to really look at where their curriculum is coming from and what they are teaching. That curriculum that they are using is directly from the Gospel Project, which was written by the Southern Baptist Convention. This is not non-denominational. This is a very narrow interpretation, a very hateful interpretation. And that's where we see these problems coming in, like saying, I can't be friends with you because you look like a lesbian, because what they're teaching these kids is that if you are a part of the LGBTQ plus community, you are going to hell. If your parents are divorced, you are going to hell, right? If you are not a believer and you do not accept Christ, you are going to hell.
Are your parents married? If not, they're going to hell. You're probably
I
going to
think,
hell if they had you while not being married.
and I'm not trying to disparage any Christian beliefs at all. There are so many different interpretations and denominations of Christianity. But what really sticks out to me with this, again, they claim this is character education, but they have this very Calvinistic leaning, which says it doesn't matter what good works you do, the only chance of salvation is through Jesus. How are you going to say that you're teaching character education when you're simultaneously telling children that good works don't matter? How you treat other people doesn't matter. And that's what's happening. We have lessons that we have, you know, dove into, and posted. I actually got sued personally because I published their curriculum because they were not making it public to anybody. They would not share it with clergymen. They wouldn't share it with school boards. They wouldn't share it with parents until I posted it online. They sued me for copyright infringement. We ended up settling, and part of that settlement is that they had to make it publicly available for people to review. So we've done that. We went and looked at some of these lessons and reviewed some of them. And the one that sticks out, or at least one of many that sticks out in particular, is a lesson about good kids versus bad kids. Molly, you can talk about that a little more.
Well, good kids go to church and they behave themselves. They don't act out in class and they don't interrupt people and they don't steal and they don't lie and these sort of things. And in that particular lesson, a lot of the problems that are with the bad child are very much stuff that our neurodivergent children deal with. Not being able to control themselves, not being able to focus, not being able to keep their voice down, these sort of things. The fidgeting, there's all sorts of things, but it's very clear in the lesson. They very specifically say, and it's also very sexist because of course they make the boy the bad kid and they make the girl who loves church the good kid. The boy who's the bad kid thinks church, this is a quote, thinks church is dumb. There's all these like subtle messages in their curriculum and in their lessons. And then if you're not looking at their lessons, go and look at what the teachers are given. Go and look at what the volunteers are given as far as their guidelines. They have a page that's called How to Answer Difficult Questions from Students. And it basically lays out like, what if my parents are gay? They're sinning. What if my parents aren't married? They're sinning. What if I think I might be a different gender? You can't be. Sorry, God made everybody in their perfect way, and to think anything else is a sin, right? So it's standard, it's standard messaging as far as LGBTQ hate and rhetoric goes. And they've embedded it both into the curriculum and into what they're giving the teachers and like their underlying policies. So it's coming from both areas. There's also heavily in that particular lesson some anti-Semitism that we have had several people that are Jewish and that are experts in Judaism and look at, and they're like, oh, that's absolutely anti-Semitism. They're framing the Jews as thinking they're better than everyone is what it actually says. So there's things all up and down that are huge issues, and they present themselves as, like Zach said, being innocent, and they're really preying on innocent communities. Now there are people that know exactly what's going on, they know exactly what they're doing, and then there are lots of sweet retired people and ex-teachers and well-meaning small churches that are absolutely being duped into this. And LifeWise really is, it's what it is it's a Christian nationalist pipeline, right? They are trying to infiltrate our school system. Our schools are already strained, our children are already divided, our families are already at war in their communities, and LifeWise is exasperating that at all levels.
And they're very open about it. I know I want to keep an eye on our time here so that we have enough time to go over everything else.
Yes.
But they're very open about what they are trying to do. And this is about converting children. Again, this is what makes them so much different. Aside from all of the issues and all the other stuff that we've seen, What really makes them stand out compared to other historical RTRI programs is the fact that they are targeting, quote, unchurched students. That is their own terminology. They are trying to convert children who do not go. And like
Just
Molly said, this is a political movement. They are backed by so many signatories of Project 2025. They are being pushed by these huge conservative think tanks and organizations, First Liberty, the Alliance Defending Freedom, Wall Builders. We could
the
go on and
Heritage
on.
Foundation,
We
Family
could,
Policy Alliance. We literally could go on for hours. We don't have time to name them all, but we do have them linked if you go to our website.
and they are also in the pockets of legislators, something that we've seen that I find very concerning in Ohio. The CEO called the lieutenant governor, who then called a school board member who was not on board with passing a policy. This school board member was holding out to pass a policy before Ohio changed their laws. They did not want to pass this policy. So the CEO of this company called our lieutenant governor, who then called and pressured a school board member. I cannot imagine being an elected official in a small local community and getting a call from the lieutenant governor telling you what to do. That is insane. But
Mhm.
that's the type of stuff that we see happening.
Yeah, and so just really, really quickly, we got kids coming home crying that they're going to hell and having nightmares, not being able to sleep at night. We have kids telling their families, I don't want to be Jewish anymore. Why do I have to be Jewish? We have kids crying and crying and crying. Why can't I go? I want to be included. All my friends go. We have families that have like, now they have all these issues and like questions around their own faith because of this being brought up in the school. We have children that whose education is suffering, like Zach's daughter. We have that happen over and over and over again because we don't have the resources to both teach the children that are still there and then catch the children up who are left.
One
Right.
of the arguments is always that just don't send your kids, it doesn't affect you. That is such BS because it
Yes.
does. It affects every student in that building when their lesson plans are being held up, when they are being othered, when the teachers are being told you can't teach new material during this time, which is what we see time and time again, right? So real quick, I just want to touch on how they are trying to change legislation, and then Molly can touch on our work, and then we'll move on to Anita here. But it's really important to understand they have changed laws in 5 or 6 states already. Again, like we said, when this first came out in the 50s and Zorak upheld it, it was that schools could allow this. They are now pushing so that schools have to allow these programs in, and they're not stopping there. Um, they claim there's over 20 bills for this next upcoming legislative session. Texas changed theirs in June of last year. I believe it was Senate Bill 1049 that they passed in Texas. And what's interesting about Texas's language is they're also saying we can do this in the school building because of equal access, right? So they are trying to overturn the precedent set forward by the Supreme Court in state laws. And the only way this is going to be stopped is if one of these larger organizations stands up and actually does something and brings a lawsuit, because this is absurd. You cannot just overturn Supreme Court precedent in state law. That's not how any of this works.
No.
But they're going
And
to keep pushing these lines. And we see it with everything. Every time they can cross the line, they will. And it is intentional because they want to change these laws.
yeah, I just want to put it in perspective for everyone. I went and looked up the 10 largest school districts in Texas. 7 of the 10 largest school districts in Texas are currently launching a LifeWise program. That means that they are already past step 10 of their 10-step implication. I'm sorry, nope, not gonna happen. They are already past their entire 10-step plan, and they are starting. That means that they are actively recruiting children. So the other 3 have their interest list over half signed. I didn't have time to look up every school district in Texas, but I wish I did, because I'm telling you that is across the board. The more religious, the more evangelical presence there is, the more Project 2025, the more that you are going to see that they are coming. And you won't know until they're sending home a flyer to your children. That's the other thing. There's no announcements. They don't make a scene. They don't advertise until they are absolutely ready, and then they are sending that home, and that's the division has started then. So it's just important to know the impacts are real. Students are facing peer pressure, instruction time is lost. We've gone all over this. So, at the end of the day, public schools are being turned into mission fields. And that's the national picture. So what we are doing is we're providing insight and information, Freedom of Information Act templates, legal analysis, state-by-state tracking. We're a support network where parents can share what's happening on the ground, people that are scared to speak out, like teachers or parents that are just living in a small town. Anyone can come and join us. We encourage you to do so. And so that's the national picture. That's what we're seeing across the states. Early on, we realized that while every battle is local, parents needed a way to connect those fights and raise a national alarm. And that is what C has become, the system that helps parents in Ohio learn from parents in Kentucky, that makes sure that a story from Indiana reaches parents in Nebraska. These programs count on communities being isolated and overwhelmed, but we know we're stronger when we share information and we stand together. And nobody knows that better than Anita, who's been on the front lines in Kentucky. And she can tell you firsthand how
Yeah.
her life has gone.
Yeah, thank you. I want to make sure that I tell you all how much we appreciate Molly and Zach and their organization. Without them, we would be so many steps behind, because when this came into our community, and it came in exactly like she just portrayed it, it was under the radar. It was only because one of our members happened to be at the school board meeting to talk about ICE, to inquire of the school board as to what policies and procedures do you have in place to deal with, the situation there. And she happened to be sitting there, and up walks someone from LifeWise to talk about, we have given you this proposal. We're hoping you will approve this. And then immediately after she sits down, a parent from that school gets up to talk. And he is questioning everything. And he's giving all this information. And our member immediately texts us and says, guys, something is going on in the county. Has anyone ever heard of LifeWise? And so we were immediately, antennas up. No, what is this? It takes about maybe a half hour at the most to do a real dive into LifeWise, to see there's problems. There are problems with this. So our group had already been formed because of the ICE Oldham County Detention Center agreement. We were very upset about that, had formed. We had structure kind of in place. And then when this happened, we were ready to go. We were able to move more quickly because as we started, we knew we had to go research, and we have great people on our team that are just so good at researching, and immediately went to the website, SEA website. And we went to a few others, and we were just trying to gather information. We were trying to share that. I was doing that. I was also going out to find out, what does the law say in Kentucky? Because it varies. And there was a lot of misinformation going on about that, intentionally so, honestly, at certain levels with that. So we're trying to get up to speed. I'm contacting people at Kentucky Department of Ed. I'm contacting people at the Kentucky School Board Association. I previously worked at the district level, so I understood, the kind of the mechanisms out there, the way things kind of roll out with board policy, who to go to. So I was able to talk to folks and them give me background on what was happening legally and from the school board associations that advises every county in Kentucky. So we're gathering this information as quickly as we can, but you all, as Molly said, they were already wanting approval, already there.
That's
Bus
step
purchase.
6. Sorry,
Yeah.
I didn't mean to interrupt
Yeah,
you, but
no,
that's
yeah.
step 6 in their 10-step plan is where she
Yeah.
caught them.
And we are just like, what the heck? They have a bus. They have a school bus ready to go. And we're like, oh my gosh. So we're having to move very quickly because they want to start the program in September. This meeting was in July that we find out this is happening. So while we're doing that, we're like, okay, we've got to get something rolling immediately. So we immediately started a petition and pushed it out through social media and all the different groups that we know in the county to tell folks, hey, this is what's happening. Do you want this in the school? Because we know no survey, parents in the school did not know about it, where they're proposing to do this. So we immediately launched that out there because we wanted to get people to realize, oh, somebody notices now, right? Some of us, thank goodness for Zach and what he went through, we get permission to read the curriculum. I spent untold hours going through reading that curriculum. And remember, my background is in that. I was a assistant superintendent of curriculum instruction. And so for me, I look at it through the lens of, is it appropriate, developmentally appropriate? What's the topic? How are teachers trained? You know, I look at it from that. That's just my training, right? I don't get very far into this I mean, my bells are going off and I'm taking screenshots and trying to make notes. And I have made untold pages of notes of things that are and they're exactly how Molly and Zach have described it. They're inappropriate. Just the way everything is loaded and biased with it. They're anti-science. You know, we could go down the rabbit hole of dinosaurs on the ark, but I won't do that here. But there were so many things that just were just like, oh my gosh. So we were doing this. We quickly called our leadership team meeting and we said, okay, we have to get some things going. We've got to have a strategy. So basically, what we did in that meeting, we did build shared knowledge because we have to understand as best we could at that time what's going on. So we spent that time doing it. Then we said, okay, we've got 2 goals. Our first goal is to stop LifeWise this year. We have to try to stop it this year at the school to keep it from spreading in the county. The second thing was to expose LifeWise for what it was, not what it tells the board and parents that it is. Those are 2 totally different things. So we had 2 goals. Then we said, okay, what are our strategies? What's our strategy? And basically, I was advising the team that you have 2 audiences, okay? One audience, and it's your first audience that you have to focus on, is the school board. Those 5 people will make the decision. No one else, those 5. So we have to figure out, how do we persuade those 5 to vote no? And once again, because my background and the director of our organization, he's a lifelong educator, has been an administrator. We both know the school board does not like liability. That speaks so loudly to them. Student safety. Okay, these are leverage points. We also knew that bad press, a board does not like bad press, especially our school board, which is our county is very much known for its academics, has a wonderful reputation, has for years across the state. So we knew those were leverage points to use. The second target was the public, the community, the parents. And they have different things that they need to be made aware of, and it's stressed to them. And one of which is the loss of instructional time. 30+ hours, that's a minimum. That is a minimum of the program. That is taxpayer money wasted. This Oldham is a community of mainly conservatives, very much about money and, saving money, blah, blah, blah. And we are leveraging that point to say, your taxpayer money is being wasted. Do you want kids to be sitting in a study hall when they can be having instruction? The second part of that, we have had a strong history of arts, music programming, technology, spent a lot of money over the years to develop programs. And so the other leverage point with the community is, why would we do this when we spent all this money and time building these tremendous programs? We also hit on the liability, the safety, the bullying, and the false claims. We want our parents and our community to know, once again, it's not what they say they are. So that was where we came in, when we had 2 audiences, and then we had to kind of attack them differently. And then we realized we've got to get the press involved. And the press has a different, our approach to them. They like hot button, controversial things, right? And they had no idea it was happening. Zero. And we very quickly got to our resources in the press. We had already got a lot of press because of our stance against ICE. So we started maneuvering that. Then we started reaching out to anybody else we thought might be interested. So that was our short-term plan, trying to get all that up and going. And then we had our action plans. We immediately hosted a meeting, invited people to come in to learn about LifeWise. And when we did that, we made sure that we brought in faith leaders from the community to speak about the interdenominational claim. And we have 2 or 3 that are so wonderful. And they actually went to the board meeting to share that, in addition to our meeting that we had, kind of a town hall thing. So that was very important, to engage our faith leaders, local ones, to have a meeting to share what we have found out with community members that we thought would need to know this. We immediately started an email campaign to the school board members. Mike and I would write an email every so many days that was sent directly to the school board members and the chair and the superintendent. And we would break down maybe 1 or 2 issues, starting with liability, safety concerns. And so we would do this every so many days, doing a drill down. So they were receiving fact-based information with that. We would copy those emails onto our social media platforms so that all of our members and the public could see what we were questioning and what we were sharing to the board. So they can't say they don't know, because we have tried to inform. So we were doing that. We started the press outreach. I've mentioned that. We started a very heavy presence on social media. We have awesome people who have careers in media that are cranking out TikToks, Instagrams, Facebook stuff, just graphics, etc. We were just hitting that hard, pushing them out to everyone to get the attention out there. We enlisted speakers for the next school board meeting. We wanted a strong presence there because, FYI, LifeWise will show up in red to these school board meetings, and they will bust people in from Ohio to sit in the audience to have their presence. And we knew that. So we brought our folks in.
Just really quickly, notice how they're using the same tactics on adults as they are children, because they also have the LifeWise children wear their LifeWise t-shirts to school that day to out them to the other kids that aren't going.
That's
so
right.
There's very much a whole theme of this going on from the adults to the children. Go ahead, Anita.
It is. It definitely is. And so we asked, and we kind of coordinated the speakers because we did not want redundancy. We knew there would be a lot of speakers. And so we crafted that. So we had our faith leaders get up. We had John Sutton from AU, Americans United, to talk about it and give support, which was wonderful. We had parents. I spoke from the instructional time perspective. Mike, the director, spoke from the transparency or lack of, to question that before the board. He kind of took that, what's going on here? Why was this going on and no one knew? So we had great perspectives coming in during that school board meeting, which was quite long. There's no action taken. Okay, there's no direct action being taken right now. It's under advisement. Our board is waiting for the Attorney General to weigh in on the law. So we are still in that wait. We're pressing. We're getting information out there. We've done, like I said, petitions. We've done open records. We've analyzed those to see who are the players. How did this happen? Was this a top down or was this a bottom up? Interestingly, it was really a top down with some bottom up from LifeWise, but that's a political issue. I'll put that aside. But right now we are trying to get as many people at our next board meeting. We're doing emails, social media, press. AU has been good. They've jumped in to help us. That's because we have a local chapter. They've taken out a full page ad in the local paper, and they are publishing what an op-ed that I wrote with the former board chair who served for 19 years, who is adamantly opposed to this, to just tell the community this does not need to happen, call your board members. So we know right now we're in a very, we're still contesting. There's no final decision. We're fighting very hard to keep this from coming in. We also, that's short term. We also know long term that we want to push out and get the word out to all superintendents and school board chairs across Kentucky. We will be pivoting to that within 2 weeks because we want to try to keep this from growing. And then the third long-term thing that we know is that we're going to have to engage with legislators because they will try. We already know this. We already know it. We've heard it. We believe it, that they're going to try to change this from a may state to a shall state. One good thing about Kentuckians, even at the legislative, they can be a little hard-headed and sometimes they can go, no, we're not going to do what someone else did. Sometimes that's been not so good, but this may be a good time that if they're being a little bit contrarian, wanting to go their own way. So we know we have to engage with our legislators to keep this from becoming a shall state. So we've got a lot of work going on. I think the key to success is using the resources already out there. Don't try to invent the wheel. We had Molly and Zach's work, and it is tremendous. It is a tremendous body of work. Social media presence is huge. I don't like it. Personally, I try not to engage a lot, but you have to do it. That's how the world is, and that's where you're going to push your message out. And you have to get local people involved. You have to have your local faith leaders, your local, maybe retired board members or teachers or whomever, because that's who the board will listen to, not someone that comes in from outside. I mean, they will, but they will listen more so to local folks talking about this. So, that's where we are as a grassroots organization. We are just very lucky because the team we have, our composition just lent itself to this battle because of people who have media background. We have a media specialist that is an educator that works at KDE that understands that big picture. 2 retired educators who worked in the district and who were administrators. We just have all these very talented people that can attack this problem. So we're out there battling. And like I said, I just want to make sure we thank Molly and Zach because they truly are the experts. And because of them, we may have a chance. We may have a chance here for this school year. So I want to make sure I thank them.
Well, we appreciate that. I mean, we appreciate the work you're doing locally too. I do want to jump in real quick before we go into Q&A here. Anita's really lucky in a sense that she is still in a May state. Texas, you guys don't have that option anymore. Your school board can't just say no. I don't know. Can I screen share here? I'm going to try. I'm not sure if it'll let me. Can you guys see my screen?
Yep.
This is a map that we've put together. Each state is different, right? There are some states that have no law whatsoever. There are these states that say the school boards may allow these programs, and then these red states are the states that have to allow these programs. And I've got LifeWise marked in all the states they lobbied last year. Not even all of the states. In some of the states they lobbied last year. Again, they're saying they're lobbying 20 different bills next year or this upcoming year. So you just have to keep that in mind. This is a national movement. They are trying to push this everywhere. They are trying to change the laws everywhere. But even in these states, and this is why I bring this up, even in these states that have to have this, it's not hopeless. You can still put guidelines into your policy. You can still address some of these issues that we're talking about proactively. And raising awareness is so key. Like Anita said, bringing in the media, having your faith leaders talk about this, just educating your community. Molly and I are happy to talk to anybody who will listen. If you would like, to tell your community more about it, if you have a local party, a local group, an activist group, we are happy to zoom in and just have a discussion, do a presentation, anything like that. So just keep that in mind when you guys are researching this and trying to educate yourselves and educate your community. We are here to help.
But first of all, round of applause. Okay, so I have a running list of questions, follow-ups, but question. We should have people come up so the mic picks it up.
Yeah, if you're in the back and they would just make sure.
But here, yeah, here should be fine. Okay, yeah,
Can you
go.
hear me? You hear me?
Yeah.
You hear me okay?
Yeah.
So
Yes.
I have a lot of questions, but one of my questions, so Texas is requiring this now. Like if it's a school, but what's the process? Do they still have to go to the school board or how? Once they're working on the list, because I looked at my local district, it says they have 17 more signatures for more people to sign up, but what does that mean practically?
So we found that the interest list is really arbitrary, right? They use it mostly as a marketing tool to other people to say, all of these people local are interested in this. The other important thing to remember about that list is that we have tested this and we've tested it more than once. Anybody from anywhere can sign that list. So I could go from Ohio, I have no connection to Texas at all, and could go inside the school district list and it would count my signature.
But what does that mean in terms of it being allowed to happen in a district? I mean,
So
what-
it really means nothing.
Right.
They take it to the district and it seems like so much more than it is. Does that make sense? So it's
Yeah.
giving them legitimacy and it's
Yeah.
giving them the
Right.
local,
How
tactic.
does the school district then allow them to have access to families and children?
Yeah, they have to coordinate the schedule. I mean, that's the thing. It used to be they had to get the board to approve this policy, yada, yada, yada. You know, the school has to have this policy now. So in theory, LifeWise could just show up and say, we're pulling these kids out. But realistically, they have to coordinate the schedule with somebody. So that's where the district involvement is really going to be. And that's why it's important. I'm not sure if Texas law, I would have to look, I don't have it handy. I'm not sure if it says the kids can't miss core classes. That's something we've done in Ohio.
It doesn't.
It doesn't say that. That's insane.
But it does. I don't understand that, because mandatory instruction is required in Texas. Not only that, but schools are held accountable for that. And that's just nuts, right? I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, that's an issue that you need to push with legislators or with your school board. And
So
again, this stuff is only going to be settled over lawsuits.
Yep.
That's really the only way any of this is going to be settled.
This was enacted this year, it was approved.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was approved in June and I believe it went into effect September 1st from what I was reading earlier.
So that's why they're hitting it this year.
And this is one thing that I've seen you kind of advise people, right, to even in shall states where school boards have some room to maneuver, for example, to reevaluate all classes, right, and make them all mandatory, right?
Right.
So
If that's not part of Texas's law, I mean, I don't know that strategy will work.
And the thing is that it hurts children. I mean, it hurts them to pull them out. How long are they allowed to pull them out for? Like, what are they pulling them out for, half a day, an hour? Like,
Each state is different. Some states are an hour, some states are 2 hours, some states are 5 hours a week.
but how is that determined? Is it determined in the law, or do the local LEAs do it themselves? Like, who's doing that?
Usually it's determined in the state law.
Yeah.
I know that we have some lawyers in the room from Americans United and American Atheists, so I don't know if you have any more specifics on that. I'm kind of putting you on the spot. But
Yeah, one of my buddies in education,
Yeah.
the attorney for district.
so it really varies, right? It varies state to state, and I think one of the messages here, know the laws, right?
Right.
Know what they mean, and then so try to figure out strategies for your communities. Other questions?
What was the Senate bill that was passed? What was the number? So we could look at the bill.
1049, I believe.
You'll also want to watch for a sister bill because they do that a lot too. They consistently introduce 2 identical bills in the Senate and in the House of the state at the same time.
I also want to point out that there's a constitutional election in Texas in November. And one of the planks that people will be voting on is that parents have the right to direct, all things, around the children's upbringing. So I could just, when you said that, like, that's one of the arguments about this.
Yeah.
I wonder if this is, tied together in some way, like,
It most likely will be.
And-
Yeah,
and-
it most likely will be. It's very much, and I'm sure Anita can confirm, it's very much naturally almost turns into a parental rights issue. And the problem with that, that we have to bring up time and again is like, okay, well, where your parental rights start to impede on mine is where they're no longer like our individual rights as parents, right? Because when you're affecting Zach's daughter's education, that's his rights, that's his daughter's rights to an education. And so when you start to negate rights is when there's an issue. And that just goes to show you like what I tried to tell, what I tried to make a point in the beginning is like, this may be an old law. it may be an old practice, but it is so isolated and it works in such a small percentage of time and is such a hard thing to make happen that it really should have never been legal to begin with. And it really needs to be revisited.
Taking advantage of things like that were in existence, that they can then, opportunistically.
Yeah.
Right.
We
And
constantly talk about that they've bastardized the law, right? Because that's what it is. The intent is completely bastardized to what it was originally.
On it kind of also.
Right. And it's growing exponentially. I mean, it went from 2 to 5 to 8 to hundreds.
Yeah.
They're smart. Do you, yeah. Okay.
I just looked up the law and it doesn't say anything about court. It doesn't have any time restrictions in it. So I mean, that's good, in a way, your schools can limit this time restriction to 40 minutes if they want, because the law doesn't say they have to allow 2 hours like some schools do.
However, there are regulations in Texas, and every school board has policies that require them to assure that these things are met. So the parents have to know that. Parents have to know that.
Mhm. And in Kentucky, the way the law was written, it's 1 hour,
Mhm.
1 hour a week.
Yep.
And if you want a different look at how a law can be written or formed up, you can go to Kentucky Senate Bill 19, and you can see what Kentucky's legislators added to this, which does put onus on the organization to have to prove certain things to the school board before they can take kids out of the classroom. Okay. And each, I guess each state has different approaches to that. We do have that leverage point a little bit, but of course they're going to revisit it in January. So we're just going to have to adapt and move to it. But we're 1 hour and ours looks totally different than Texas.
It's very much like either super vague language, right? So very vague, which looks like what Texas is, which can be a good thing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
A lot of the other states, some of the other states, their language is so very specific that it backs you into the wall. In some of those areas, I'm not sure how it's even legal with the other laws, but needless to say, they differ so wildly in the way that they're broken down and the language that's used that I mean, in some ways you're damned if you are and you're damned if you're not. Like either way could serve you or hurt you, just depending on it. So it's very strategic, like the line that you're going to be walking as far as the religious freedom and the parental rights issue and like the actual integrity of your public education and everyone's rights.
I'm thinking, Molly and Zach, we know there are districts or schools in Ohio that have rejected, right? That rejected. What's the status of that? Now are they having to go back in because it's a shall state?
Yeah, they all had to go back and change it.
No recourse. Okay.
And that's what prompted it, So we were
Okay.
just starting to get our organization started in Ohio because that's where unfortunately LifeWise began. But we had to force them into being, transparent about certain things. And once we sort of got everyone to wake up and understand what was going on, we had a lot of school districts that were ready to fight, ready to push back, ready to go to the court, ready to do lawsuits, all of that. And it just so happens, and I will tell you this right up front, go and look at your most controversial legislators. Go and look at the ones that you think are dirty, and that is who is dealing with LifeWise. Because Ohio, it was very much a coordinated effort under all of the constituents' noses to get it passed, no matter what the people here wanted to be done. So, and Anita could probably, she'll tell you that in their state, there's probably much of the same. It is some of their worst and most extremist right wing, just parental rights people that are pushing this. And that's how you know that it's really not what it seems to be. It's not as innocent as it seems. They do have an underlying cause, and that is to destroy public education. It is part of the Seven Mountain Mandate. It is part of their belief in Christian nationalism that they should rule over every aspect of our society, and this just happens to be education.
Right.
And you've been, I mean, I've heard this from you, and I've heard this from school board members that I've talked to, right, who see this sort of movement hand in hand with the defunding, right? With the defunding, whether it's the school voucher programs or other programs, that they're seeing. So all this is happening hand in hand.
They're all
And
connected.
Mhm.
any more questions from here?
Real quick,
Yeah,
the
go
seven, what's the significance of seven mountains?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, boy.
This is 90 seconds.
We don't have time. We don't have time for that, but I'll give you the short one and you
Here.
can look this up. Literally, it's literally this. It is an evangelical Christian nationalist belief that there are seven mountains of influence over our society, over our culture. And I mean that like they're speaking in terms of the United States, but the Christians think in terms of the entire world. Okay. But specifically with the United States and our laws, it's government, it's media, it's arts and entertainment, it's education, it's finances. I'd have to look up the other ones. I'm trying to think what they
Culture, media.
culture, media. It's actually have it pulled up. The point is, though, is that this mountain is education, okay? And we've all heard the trope before, the children are our future. Education is a foundation of democracy. That's not a joke, okay? And when you start to groom the future generations into a mindset, when you're pressuring them into believing an ideology, when they're feeling that both from their parents and their administrators and their peers, then you have a recipe for fascism disaster, because that is what is happening. And the Seven Mountain Mandate plays a huge hand in that.
It's about exerting control over
Yes.
each one of these things, not just to have control, but because they believe it is their divine right, because
Yes.
they are Christians, and God has appointed them to take control over each of these mountains to then control the state, right? The country.
Does it have anything to do with the book of Revelations?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, because I was at a funeral yesterday, right here at Highland Park Presbyterian Church, and the minister, quote, said something out of the book of Revelations about the seven mountains. I couldn't really follow. I don't know why he was doing that.
It's how they bring about the end times. Once they have control of all the seven mountains, then that's when the end times come. That's when they will be exalted and the rest of us will, so
And
it's
again, we don't want to lump all Christians in. We're saying
No.
Christians, but like not by
Right.
any means, we're not trying to lump all
No.
Christians in.
I
This
think
is one
everyone,
interpretation.
yeah, everyone should be very aware by now that there's a big difference between Christianity and Christian nationalism, and that you need to understand that first, foremost, before you go into this fight, because you're going to run into a lot of good, faithful Christians who do not like being told the truth. Okay.
And
And
And they
this is where faith, right? Where faith leaders come in.
Yeah,
exactly.
I think
In battle, right? Anita, you have some people in your group, and I've talked to pastors and sort of clergy. So if you're going to be doing this fight locally,
you have
part of the
you have to have them part of this conversation, because they can talk about Christian nationalism and it gets people's attention, right? If I get up there and say it, they're like, they're just like, oh, that's some wacko, blah, blah, blah.
We're just a bunch of
But-
Satanists and atheists,
Yeah,
right? That's what
yeah,
we're told
and-
every time.
Or you're just not the real kind of Christian. You're not a real Christian. That's what we get told. We have people in our group that are very active in their church, and so you're just told you're not a real Christian. But I want to make this point that we're also going to do. One of the things we feel strongly about, we don't think enough people understand Christian nationalism. To that question that just happened or was asked, I didn't know what that was either. I had no idea. I'm reading through and I'm over here trying to Google and learn all this. So one of the things that we're going to do is start having, town halls or sessions where we invite faith leaders in, and anybody wants to attend to come and learn Christianity versus Christian nationalism, and do this and educating people about this. We feel we have to do that at the local level so that people understand this at a deeper level, because they don't.
And we're doing the same thing. We actually have plans for, I think we're going to do it in November? Yeah, I think we're going to do it in either November or December. We ourselves, Secular Education Association, are going to do an entire Christianity versus Christian nationalism faith leaders, secular voices, everyone, right? We're going to have everyone share their part in it. And
That's the big names. We'll keep those under wraps for now.
Yeah,
I'm
but I
pretty
would-
excited
Excellent.
about it.
Good.
I agree 100%, Anita. And like to what we were talking about when we're talking about the 7 Mountain Mandate, look up the New Apostolic Reformation. That's NAR. N like Nancy, A like Apple, R like Rachel. Okay. NAR. Look up the Black Robe Regiment. Obviously, educate yourself on Project 2025. This is part of it. And please understand that LifeWise is an RTRI program. It is not the only one that exists. There are others that are trying to do the same thing. And also understand this, that it's not just RTRI programs. Think about it. All right. I want you to think about the multifaceted attack on a public school day. Think about you're a Jewish child. Okay. You go to school in the morning, they're doing prayer at the pole. You go to during lunchtime, they're taking kids off campus to go to LifeWise. Yeah. After school, they're having the Good News Club. Yeah, which is student led, of course. It never is. There's all of these things. There's a program called Bible to Schools that brings Bibles in and makes sure that your school library has the Bible, okay, in it, and different variations of said Bible. So you've got the FCA. They're huge into it, and they are a problem. You've got Good News Club. You've got prayer at the pole stuff. You've got these RTRI programs. You've got success sequence bills are another thing they're trying to push is in line with all of this. So there are so
Ten Commandments, the chaplain bills. I mean, it is
the
it
Ten
is through
Commandments,
this
the
child's
chaplain
entire
bill.
school day.
Yes, every single one of those things is an attack on the secularism of our public schools. And that is a problem when we have such a diverse population of children, and 90% of them, that is, going to public schools. And we really, Zach and I, we're just parents. We're just parents that are concerned, and we saw a problem and we had to fix it ourselves because we couldn't get any help from anyone else. And again, not to disparage these other organizations, but at this point, we are the only people that are paying attention to preserving the secularism of public education, and just that are focused on that. And so I think that's a really important thing to remember, is that we've sort of let this slide for a couple decades, and now this is where we've ended up.
Mhm.
And that, yeah, I'm getting, we got to close out. Thank you so much. This was an amazing note to close on. If peaks on Google, Secular Education Association, Kentucky Citizens for Democracy, they'll find you or find me. I will connect. Thank you. Thank
You're
you
welcome.
so much for your time.
Thank
and
you. Thank you for doing
and
this.
your work.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
I'll talk to you. Bye. Thank
Okay.
you.
Bye-bye, you all.
Everyone.
Good night.